In the last video we had a look at sort of standard Western music notation, which is probably the most common and recognisable form of music notation that's out there. However, there are lots of other techniques that we can use to write down our musical ideas. A number of new techniques for writing down music have appeared over the last 100 years or so. Some of these have been directly stimulated by the fact that, as well as giving me a piece of paper, you can also give me a recording of the music to help me learn it. One such example of this is guitar tablature. Various forms of guitar tablature have existed before in history. On first glance, guitar tablature can look a little bit like normal standard sheet music, but if we look a little bit closer, we'll see that instead of the normal 5 lines, the staff in guitar tablature contains 6 lines. That's because each of these lines maps directly onto each string of the guitar. The guitar has 6 strings, so guitar tablature has 6 lines. Each line on guitar tablature represents one string on the guitar, going from the bottom. So we can label these E, A, D, G, B, and E. Now, instead of notes appearing on these lines like we see in standard sheet music, we see numbers. When a number appears on a line in guitar tablature, that's telling us what number fret we should play on that particular string. So, if we see a number 7 on the second line up in guitar tablature, that's telling us we should find the 7th fret on the A string. Any melody that you can write down in standard Western notation, you can also write down using the lines and numbers of guitar tablature. Now very quickly you'll start to notice that there's something that's very common in normal standard Western notation and is lacking a bit here in guitar tab. Information about how long all of these notes last for. Because actually we can learn the rhythms of the songs that we want to play purely by listening to the recording on a CD or on YouTube. So we don't need to write this often complex information into the music. All we need to know are the pitches, and then we'll get the rest from listening to the song. Also, the fantastic thing about guitar tablature is that it's evolved to show the kinds of playing techniques that guitarists often use. For example, when we see an H between 2 numbers on a guitar tablature staff, that's telling us that we're to perform a hammer-on. A hammer-on is a technique where a guitarist changes the note he's playing just by what he does with his left hand. So instead of re-plucking the string with his right hand, hammering on another one of his fingers with his left hand changes the pitch of the note that's playing. The opposite of a hammer-on is a pull-off, where a musician changes the pitch of the note that he's playing with his left hand by releasing a particular note that he's been playing, and a different finger lower down the guitar is played instead. This is represented with a P in the music, P for pull-off. Another really important part of guitar playing technique is the ability to bend the strings to change the pitch of the notes you're playing. This could be represented in a number of different ways in guitar tab, but most of the time it involves writing the letter B between 2 numbers. In this example, the guitar tab is telling us to play the 9th fret on the guitar on the D string, but then to bend that string up such that it produces a pitch that's equivalent to the 11th fret on that string. Just like reading any type of musical notation, getting to grips with guitar tab requires a lot of practice. Now, another form of modern music notation that is used by not just guitarists but lots of different instrumentalists is to use chord symbols. Chord symbols give us a really good idea of what harmony we're to use to accompany a particular piece of music. It doesn't give us exact details as to which notes to play, but oftentimes composers of certain genres like pop, rock and jazz aren't that bothered about exactly which notes you use to produce a G major chord, they're just keen that you use G major harmony. So in this example, the composer is telling us which chords we're supposed to use to accompany this simple melody. If you were playing in a jazz band, this is often the type of music notation that everyone in the band will use. The different instrumentalists of the band will know how to realise these symbols on their instrument. For example, the bass player will see these chord symbols and know approximately which notes to play, because the composer is telling him what the important chords will be in the music. So if a composer tells you to play a G chord, most of the time a bass player will automatically play a G. For pianists and guitar players, they can use their skill and creativity and knowledge of harmony to choose a really good G chord to fit the particular situation that they're playing in. Depending on the style of music, chord symbols are often accompanied by a written out melody line in standard Western notation that in a jazz band might be played by a saxophonist or a clarinetist, or in rock and pop music, sometimes we just get the lyrics of the song. We can then have some fun choosing exactly which set of chords we're going to use to accompany these lyrics. Some composers have been even more imaginative with the ways in which they write down music. Take a look at this. This is a score, just like any other that we've seen so far. But instead of using a written style, a notational style, this composer has chosen to use a graphical score. This is where the composer tries to write down his ideas not in lines and dots that we've seen so far, or even numbers like in Guitar Tab, but with pictures. This composer is trying to draw exactly how he wants his music to sound. Certain composers have chosen to use this method because it leaves the performer in a much freer situation to decide exactly how they're going to play this music. Probably, if you gave this music to 1,000 different people, not a single one of them would play it the same. Particularly in the 20th and the 21st centuries, composers like this element of freedom to be added to their music. For example, what do you think this score might sound like? Finally, to round off this lesson on alternative and modern music notation techniques, I just wanted to talk a little bit about recording. For lots of composers and musicians in the past, the opportunity and even the luxury of recording wasn't available to them. They had to painstakingly go and write down all of their ideas if they ever wanted to have them played by a bigger group of people than just themselves on their own, or to have them stored in some way so they could come back and look at them later. Mozart often spoke about what a bore it was to have to laboriously write down all of his musical ideas. Imagine if Mozart was able to load up his MacBook and do some recordings straight from the keyboard. Chances are we'd have a lot more music from Mozart than we do today. Increasingly, lots of composers are finding it much easier to dispense with music notation completely, particularly if they're the only person involved in producing the music. Software like Apple's Logic or Pro Tools allows us to go and produce really great recordings straight away, without the need to notate the music. That said, knowing one or more of these notational techniques will open the door for you to explore lots and lots of really exciting music. Which techniques you learn kind of depends on which music you'd like to explore. For example, if you're a piano player who wants to explore Beethoven's piano sonatas, chances are you're going to have to learn a bit of Western standard notation, unless you want to try and transcribe all of those really complicated piano sonatas by ear. If, on the other hand, the thing you really want to do is play in a rock band, you might be better off learning some Guitar Tab, or learning how to realize chord symbols on the piano. But I think everyone can really benefit with knowing how to make simple recordings of the music they're making. We'll be dealing with this in a future series.